Thank you, everybody who joined us. I'm quite excited to take you through. Like we said, we're going to focus and try and get this done in under 30 minutes. So I'm going to jump straight in. For those who haven't been in last week's webinar, it's very much the same. I'm going to take you through the process. So all about for today, we're talking collections. So what I'm going to share are some use cases to show you how you can look at certain things that will help you improve your collections, or then also understand why are you not collecting or getting no arrangements on your book. So I'm going to jump straight in. Firstly, what I'm going to start with, I'm just going to share my screen. And what I'm going to share first is just a basic script. So looking at a basic collection script. So on that script, pretty much standard on any script that you look at, you are looking at your intro on your script. You are looking basic, and with collections, we all know that obviously it's not always a very scripted environment. But as you know, with any script, is in any collection script or any collections environment, obviously you've got certain steps that you need to go through within your negotiations. So it starts with your script, your basic script, which you've got your opening. You need to say where you are phoning from. You need to say the reason for your call. You then also have some of your compliance things where we talk, you need to verify the data. Obviously, you need to make sure you're speaking to the right person. You need to get an acknowledgement of debt, and then you go through your negotiation steps. So like I've said, it is much more loose. It's not very much like your sales environment, but there are certain steps on the negotiation pathway that you need to go through. So I'm going to take you straight into queries. It's almost like doing a Google search. So what Callbi does, it transcribes your conversations. You've got it available in text format. You can then do like a Control F search function. So you can go search for the presence of specific words or phrases, or then the absence of specific words or phrases. So I'm first going to start off just to show you how easy it is to build an actual query. So I'm going to do a very basic query. As you can see, I've already built a lot of queries, and specifically for today's demo. But before I do that, I want to show you how easy it is. So let's start with a very simple example. For instance, your acknowledgement of debt by your debtor. So let's say acknowledgement of debt. Now, obviously, what we are looking at here is where the agent asked the debtor that whether they are aware of the debt, do you agree, do you acknowledge, etc. So very easy. You will then just enter in your query builder the words or phrases that you are looking for. So like I said, do you agree? Or for instance, agree and acknowledge. Or are you aware? And I'm just going to add one more. Do you acknowledge? So you'll see very easy what we will now have a look at. Apologies, let me just do the spelling correctly. When we now go search for these calls, Callbi will immediately flag any call that matches one of these words or phrases. So very user-friendly, very easy. You can then click on that actual call. It will take you to that spot within the text transcript where you can now see that was actually said and it was actually done. So that's very easy, simple to go input your queries. In the same way that you're looking for the presence of certain words or phrases, you can also build your queries to look for the absence of certain words or phrases. So I'm going to take you straight in now, having shown you how to build a query. Is like I said, I've already built some specific queries to the collections environment, and I'm going to show you how you now use those queries to gain certain insights in what your agents are doing, what are they saying, what are they not saying, and what can they do better. So first, what I'm going to show you, here are all the queries. Just looking at time, I'm not going to take you through every single query, but if anybody has any questions or you want to see details of the query, please do make contact, let us know. We can share afterwards, we can share the content of the actual queries. What I'm going to take you through now is how you use the insights from these queries. So firstly, under your dashboard, this is where you draw your actual insights. I'm going to take you to your collections, and firstly, we're going to look at all your right party contact calls. So I've built a dashboard here looking at your right party contact calls. I've already built the dashboards, but I'm also going to show you how easy it is to build a dashboard. So firstly, let's look at the scorecard. First thing that we can do is within Callbi, you can build a scorecard that will look at various checks, various metrics that needs to be passed or failed. So just to show you how easy it is to build a card, you simply just click on Add Card. I'm going to give it a name for the demo right now, example scorecard. So you give it your name, you select what presentation you want to see. For the training now, we're going to do a scorecard for the demo. You can also group your dashboard. So if you're interested more in organization level, more strategic, more on an overall, you can look at team level, agent level, for instance. For now, let's say we want to see per agent. You can then build your scorecard and include any query you need to include. So thinking about QA, and that's one of the use cases, if you are working on a QA scorecard with specific questions or checks, you will then build a query for each question or each check. You then include this query on the scorecard. So for the example here, let's quickly build a scorecard where we say we're looking at our right party contact collections calls. Firstly, they had to say that calls are recorded. So that's the first thing they need to say within that. We are also looking then that secondly, they need to verify or customer verification. So they obviously need to make sure that they are speaking to the right person. Next one, they need to obtain an acknowledgement of debt. And as you can see, all these queries have been built. It's now available in your drop-down list. Next one, and I'm not going to build a full scorecard, I'm just demonstrating how easy it is. But next one is they need to look and ask for an immediate payment. So that's just creating your payment urgency. So you will go on like this, including whatever you want to score your calls on for your scorecard. In here, once you've attached that check or question, you can then also give it a weighting. So if we talk QA scorecard, a lot of questions don't bear the same weighting. Some are more important. But for instance, you can either work on a percentage score or you can work on a point score. If we say this counts 55 points, 25 points, and let's say 10 points, just as an example. Once you've created your scorecard and you click add, it will then automatically create a card that you can filter for all the calls that you want to score. So in here, for today, we are only interested in collections and we are only interested in calls where there was a right party contact. So that's how easy it is. We just select it from our list. We say which calls to include. For instance, once we click done, it will then include those calls. So very easy, you get a scorecard, and as you scroll to your right, every check that you've added or every query that you've added on your scorecard, underneath that per agent, it will show you the percentage of calls that passed or the percentage that met that query. So very easy at a glance to see. It then also calculates an overall percentage score, which you can sort highest to lowest, but again, immediately it shows you your outliers. So if you click on this, it will take you straight into your calls for that agent. You can then have a look at it and understand what happened and you can coach on it. So that's just very easy. Firstly, your scorecard. You'll see the example that I've used here is looking at your right party contacts. Obviously, when your agent contacts and makes contact with the right data, they need to go through certain steps. As example in here, you can see the scorecard that was built, but making sure the calls recorded statement, they authenticate the customer, they obtain an acknowledgement of debt. They do create payment urgency by saying an immediate payment is due. They negotiate for the payment amount, and I'm going to show you that query. They've offered discount for settlement. They push for a debit order. They also provide the benefits of making sure that they do make that payment. So that's just an example where you can see very easy, if you sort it now for the calls you are interested in, immediately you can see where there are issues. So that was your first one, looking at your QA scorecards. But you can then also drill down in details if you are only interested in certain steps or certain things. So what I've created for you are some cards just to show you the use cases. But the first one here is if you now realize that your agents are not creating a payment urgency. And I'm going to take you into that query just to show you what the query would look for. So under collections, we look at payment urgency, immediate payment due. This will look for words as per your script, like the payment is due today, you need to pay this today or tomorrow, you need to settle today, or whatever in your script indicates how soon or how urgently that payment needs to get done. So we've also just built a query here that looks for calls where none of these words are present. So you'll see in here an immediate payment was not pushed. So in this dashboard card, what we look at now is per agent on these calls. So where there was no arrangement, where there were disputes or your promise to pay calls, where they did not push or create payment urgency. So once again, very easy. You can sort this. You can see who are your agents that require attention. You can click on the names. It will take you to the calls. You can click on the call, listen to the call. You can coach or take action that you need to. So just some other examples for your right party contact. We're not talking promise to pays yet, just all your calls where there was a right party connect. Here, what we've looked at is whether they pushed for debit order. So similarly, you can create a card. The first card here shows you the percentage of your promise to pay calls and your no arrangement calls, where the agent actually pushed for debit order. So in our example, the agent must first try and obtain debit order, and the query will look for words indicating that they said they want to set up a debit order. Can we do it a debit order, or can we deduct your account? So here you can see not such a big issue, quite a big percentage of your calls your agents are pushing. But again, on your right, you can now look per agent where they did not push for a debit order on those calls. Then just here at the bottom as well, updating your debtor details. Remember that now that you've gotten a hold of your debtor, you want to make sure that the details are updated. So again, you build a query, you get a card to see, are they updating the details and who are not updating, and you need to just address that. Settlement discount, similarly, once again, this card just shows you, if you look per team, you will see this card you can create looking at group by team. So here we are comparing Gauteng versus Western Cape. Immediately you can see, brilliant, in Gauteng, they are offering the settlement discount. In Western Cape, not so much. So we need to now have a look. You need to address what you need to address looking at the processes within there. Again, this is just a card per agent, payment amount negotiation, and this is actually a query that I'm going to show you. So looking at the payment amount, this is your steps where you agree with the debtor what is the amount that they will be able to pay. So quickly looking at payment negotiation under the collections, payment amount negotiated. Example here is, for instance, where they will say, we need the full balance to be paid, or then 50% of the balance. How much can you pay? The minimum amount you need to pay. All of those indicators. So this query looks at whether there was a discussion around you first need to settle, or how much can you pay, or what is the minimum amount, but there is an indicator that there was a negotiation on this call. So once again, looking at that card, it just shows you, was there a negotiation? And for the agents where the payment amount was not negotiated, which again, you can address, you can look at those agents. Here, just an interesting card is a query that looks at, there was an indication from the debtor that there is no income. And I'm going to take you to that query. This then just looks at whether the agent used probing questions wherever they received that indication. So probing questions in terms of alternative source of funds. So this shows you the percentage of calls where agents actually probed after the debtor indicated that they are unable to pay. And I'm quickly, just again, I want to show you that query, but looking at probing. So again, at the bottom, collections, your probing questions would be things like retrenchment package, do you receive UIF, grants, can your family assist, all of those things. So you can build a query where your data, it picks up, I'm unemployed, I'm not working, and then that query looks for whether the agent mentioned any of those things in return or whether they did not. So that was your right party contact. Next thing you want to do is then also look at your calls where your agent did obtain a promise to pay. So the next one we're going to look at is your promise to pay calls and some analysis that you can do on that. Firstly, specifically looking at your promise to pay debit order calls. On here, part of the process is you are hoping that your agent will confirm the bank account details when they obtain a promise to pay debit order call, just to make sure that we do have the right details. So this first card, looking at a query, will look at the percentage of your debit order calls where the bank account details was confirmed. This is looking good, doesn't seem to be an issue, but again, you can then just highlight your agents who did not confirm the account details. Secondly, also your debit order calls, you do want your agent to align the debit order date with salary date of your debtor. So again, this query looks at whether there was a request of when is your salary date, when do you get paid, and it shows you if your agents are doing it or if they are not doing it. The next one, a very interesting one, is on your promise to pay calls. This card looks at your promise to pay calls. The agent wrapped or disposed of the call as a promise to pay. But somewhere within that conversation, there was an indication from the debtor that they are unable to pay. So they are either unemployed, they've been retrenched, they are ill, anything like that. So two ways, it either shows agents who are really good with negotiating, or it might be something that you need to be aware of, that chances that the promise to pay is going to realize might not happen, and you need to consider that in your forecast. So that's just, again, using your query, how you can see where there might be some issues in terms of forecasting on your book. So that was your promise to pay calls. The next one is then very key also to understand your no arrangements. Understanding why did it result in a no arrangement and what could have been done. So the very first card looks at all of your calls where there was no arrangement. Debtor will not pay, debtor is not going to pay. And the first card looks at whether the agent used probing questions. So nicely they used it, but on this day we can see they did not use it effectively. And again, per agent, we can see who did not probe any of your no arrangement calls to determine if there is an alternative source of funds. So once again, if you know these agents and you can click again on the call, you can go straight there, you can listen to the call and you can coach, but then they know the steps that they need to start following to try and increase on the amount that you can collect. Also on your no arrangement calls, this next cards or the next two cards looks at whether the agent reiterated the benefits of payment and consequences of non-payment. So this is, for instance, that legal action might take place, credit bureau score will be updated, there's additional interest and fees, etc. So once again, just making sure the debtor understands that if you're not going to pay, this is the result of what's going to happen. And again, you can see if they're doing it and who is not doing it. Next one, just the last one under your no arrangements, is looking where the agent wrapped the call. They said there was no arrangement. So that lead is now closed. We're not expecting any money. But actually, there's no indication from the debtor that they will not be unable or they are unable to pay. So this again says either the agent wrapped something incorrectly, or why did they say no arrangement where there was no lead from the debtor to say that they're not able to pay the funds. Again, if you click on this, it will take you in there. Let's have a look at the first call, for instance. If we open it, you can go through, we can see, we can quickly scroll. Jan speaking, calls are recorded. They've confirmed ID. Here we can see this was actually the debtor saying, no, the account is not in arrear. I've paid everything. So actually this was an incorrect disposition or wrap because it's a dispute and it was not the debtor saying that they are unable to pay. So again, you can go into the details of this and understand your wrap codes versus the actual reality on what happened. So this is all your no arrangements. What you can then also do are some ad hoc queries. Very nicely, the first one, and in some environments, what they are interested in is whether there was at least still empathy or in the approach in how the collector or the agent approached the debtor when they spoke to them. So the first query that we're looking at here is if there was any indication that there's unemployment, job loss, illness, anything like that, whether there were words expressed that indicated empathy from the agent's side. So this is very nice to show you, and let me just quickly take you into that query. Let's just have a look, it's on the next page. Here you can see where any indication here, I'm unable to pay, I'm unemployed, I've been retrenched, I don't have money, don't have income, etc. It then looks whether any of these words are also there. So apologies for that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to hear. I can imagine it must be terrible, etc. So again, this will just show you the approach of how the agents are doing it if it is important in your environment. So there's also a bit of soft skills involved in how you can train your agents. The last one, and very important in the collections environment, we've just built a query looking, and we call it high-risk calls, but it's actually your calls where there was an expression of negative sentiment, or perhaps something indicating I will speak to my lawyer, or anything like that. So this is where we now talk 100% of calls. This looks through every single call, and it flags the calls that you need to immediately investigate to understand. So here you've got your list. It will take you straight to that spot. And here we can see, maybe I should speak to my lawyer and the financial regulator. I should go to social media. This is incompetent. So again, you will have a list. You immediately know what are high risk, what do we need to do we need to address, and who can we go to. So that was all your collections. I'm quickly just going to add a glance because next week in our webinar, we are focusing on coaching and agent performance. And a lot of what I'm quickly going to show you now will go in on more details. But you can also use within Callbi, it uses duration of calls and silences on your calls that indicates how long an agent took to get to a certain call outcome. So here, very easy using those durations, you can determine how effective an agent is either to reach a promise to pay or if they are negotiating on a no arrangement. So on top right here, what the first card looks at is your agents who achieved a promise to pay in less than 3 minutes. Obviously, your effective negotiators, your effective ones who can close, but then also your agents who took longer than a certain threshold to reach that promise to pay. So these are your agents who require a bit more attention or maybe to be put on other campaigns. At the bottom as well, looking at your no arrangement calls. First one, the no arrangement calls, that's really short. This would mean they did not negotiate. They perhaps just ended the call, but then also your calls where a no arrangement, the conversation was very long. So this would again say the agent did not quite know how to end the call. They continued trying to negotiate, whereas they actually were supposed at some stage to just end off on that call. The last one I'm going to show you just is you can also check what your agents wrapped or disposed the call of, and whether this is what happened on the call. You want to make sure that when your agents are wrapping calls, that they indicating the right thing on that call. So the first example is just looking at where the agent said it was a voicemail. You can build a query that looks for an indication of voicemail. For instance, press #hang up, you've reached the voicemail of, etc. So the first card looks at calls wrapped as a voicemail, but there's no indication on that call that there was an actual voicemail. So you know then that your agents are not using the correct codes. Secondly, also any of your calls that was closed off. Here the example is where they said there's no arrangement or the call was dropped, but in actual fact, it was a voicemail call. And then you can also have a look at where the agent said the call was dropped, so it was dropped by the debtor, but the logic test here is there was actually a conversation longer than 1.5 minutes. So something says we need to investigate, especially in a collections environment. A debtor would probably drop the call right in that first stage when they hear where you are phoning from and it's with regard to collecting money. If there's a conversation longer, you need to understand why and what happened. And again, we can see there was a 1 minute conversation. Why did the debtor drop? We can go in on this call, we can see what happened, and here we can actually realize the debtor said, I think you're wasting my time. Can you please call me back when you are better prepared? So this again indicates something happened on this call. We need to investigate the call and we need to understand it's not just the drop call in the beginning. It's an agent or a system issue that we need to investigate. So right, that was pretty much all from my side. I promised I'll do it in under 30, and I see we're on 28 minutes.